Okay, so let's talk about a few disorders of the mouth and the teeth. A lot of times when we talk about disorders, they can include infections, bacterial infections or viral infections. In this case, it'll be a bacterial infection. It also can include cancer, cancer of usually the tissues of the mouth, and some congenital defects we're going to talk about. So infections and cancer can spread throughout the mouth. Leukoplakia is a precancerous condition of the mouth, and usually this comes from, so here's an example of leukoplakia. This usually comes from chewing tobacco, and so kind of a common name for this is called snuff dipper's pouch. And what ends up happening is the area where the chewing tobacco sits becomes ooh, kind of chalky looking, and what ends up happening is the leukoplakia ends up developing cancerous tissues inside of that region there. There's also squamous cell carcinoma, and this is the most common type of mouth cancer. And basically it is a situation where, and I'm trying to erase this, squamous cell carcinoma is just basically like skin cancer inside of the mouth. The leukoplakia, or chewing tobacco cancer of the mouth, can be fixed by going out and cutting out the tissue, but depending on how long that tissue's been affected and how long somebody's been chewing tobacco will really determine how much tissue needs to be removed. One of the most common disorders of the mouth is dental caries or cavities. Yay, I know I had mine in my day. Basically, what a cavity is a situation where you have a bacterial infection of the teeth. And so what ends up happening is literally the bacteria, oops, I'm trying to erase that, the bacteria on the surface of our teeth can start eating away. The bacteria actually don't eat the teeth. What happens is the bacteria, as they're consuming usually carbohydrates like sugar, what they do is they produce acid. And the acid that the bacteria produce generate the dental caries, the cavity itself, the hole in the tooth. As that happens, the bacteria continue to proliferate and they continue to live there. So it's an infection that basically allows a burrow into the teeth themselves, and eventually the diseased teeth will the disease in the tooth will spread into adjacent tissues, sometimes into the blood, and eventually, if the dental caries is not corrected and cleaned, the tooth will die. If you lose a tooth, if an individual loses a tooth due to dental caries, it can be replaced by dentures or dental implants, but those are super expensive. Now, gingivitis is a gum inflammation, so dental caries is the teeth. Gingivitis is an infection of the gingiva or the gums of the mouth. And this can come from not taking very good care of the teeth, not having very good dental hygiene or oral hygiene. Gingivitis can also be the result of diabetes or a vitamin deficiency. Gingivitis can also occur during pregnancy due to changes in blood pressure. Crazy, right? Other disorders of the mouth, periodontitis, is the inflammation of that periodontal membrane. And so periodontitis, let's come back here real quick. So here's the gingiva. So the periodontal ligament, the periodontal membrane, this is where you'll start seeing periodontitis. So it's an inflammation in that region there. And this definitely can lead to tooth loss because that means that the ligaments are affected, and the ligaments will loosen and the teeth can be released just by eating something as simple as a chip, right? Like a tortilla chip. Thrush or oral candidiasis is a yeast infection of the mouth. And so when we think of yeast, a lot of times I know people think about bread or maybe making beer, things like that. But there is a fungal organism, a fungal yeast that lives on humans that's symbiotic with us. And sometimes they can grow out of control. And so thrush, which I believe I have a picture. Oh, I don't have a picture of thrush. You know what? You're lucky I don't have a picture of thrush. It's disgusting. Basically, what ends up happening is the yeast overblooms inside of the mouth, and it looks like chunks of cheese, like cottage cheese in the mouth. And it causes inflammation of the oral mucosa, sometimes of the tongue, and sometimes of the gingiva as well. It's really itchy. It causes inflammation and bleeding, and it can be treated with an antifungal medication. So thrush or a yeast infection in the mouth is really nasty. Little kids tend to get this pretty easily because they put their hands in their mouth a lot, or individuals with an immunocompromised system also can get thrush. Now, in terms of congenital defects of the mouth, congenital kind of means not necessarily birth defects, but defects that may happen as a consequence of embryonic development or genetic expression during embryonic development. And so in this particular case, we're looking at cleft lip and cleft palate. Cleft lip and cleft palate is an incompletion of the tissues associated with the hard palate and soft palate and the mouth to fuse completely during embryonic development. So basically, mouth structures don't complete growing together. And so over here, you can see that there's a gap at the back of this child's throat. That's because the two sides of the hard palate didn't fuse together to form a regular hard palate like what we see here. So a cleft palate would be like missing a uvula right here. It could be an entire, or sometimes it's the entire hard palate can be badly affected during cleft palate. This can be treated and corrected in children. So it's a pretty big surgery, but it can be taken care of. Salivary glands. Okay, moving on to a different organ. Salivary glands. We have 3 pairs, which means 6 glands, and they make about 1 liter of saliva a day. So think about one of those big liter containers of soda and think about filling it with saliva. Creepy. Delicious, right? If we want to joke about it. It is located, the salivary glands are located outside of the GI tract, even though the secretions tend to go into the digestive tract or GI tract. The parotid glands are the largest, and they're in the front of each ear at the top of the angle of the jaw. And you can go back to that picture that we looked at showing all the glands of the body. I'd have to go back pretty far, but take a look at that to find the parotid glands. The ducts open into the mouth right around where the second molars are. And when the parotid glands become inflamed, we call that mumps. So let's go all the way back. I hope I don't make you sick here. Here are the parotid glands way up here by the ear. Sublingual are here, and then the submandibular are over here. So whenever I say salivary gland or saliva, then I drool. I yawn, I drool. What are you going to do? I'm such an animal. Anyways, the submandibular glands are typically the glands that you feel kind of you can feel the smooth muscle squeezing out the saliva when you eat something like Sour Patch Kids. So really sour things you can sometimes feel in your submandibular glands. So submandibular, ducts open to either side of the lingual frenulum, so it's underneath. And then your sublingual glands are on the floor of the mouth, underneath our tongue. Remember we looked at that real quick? And then saliva comes with salivary amylase, and this is what initiates the digestion of carbohydrates. So just so you know, the first molecule digested in your digestive tract are carbohydrates, and it happens in the mouth, okay, through the action of salivary amylase. So first biomolecule digested, first digested equals carbs in the mouth with or using salivary amylase. Amylase, right? I really need to get a flat tablet to work on. So here's another picture showing you the parotid. The parotid duct dumps saliva up near the top of your mouth. The submandibular gland and the submandibular duct, secretes out close to the front of your teeth, and then the sublingual gland is underneath your tongue. All right, the pharynx. So one of the things that just to talk about myself for a minute, one of the things that we studied a lot when I was an undergraduate as a zoologist, because my undergraduate degree is in zoology, actually, the pharynx is a very common organ in almost all living organisms. Anything that has a digestive tract has a pharynx. The pharynx can be specialized to do a lot of things. In humans, our pharynx is broken into three regions: the nasopharynx, through which we breathe, the oral pharynx, through which we swallow things, and then the laryngeal pharynx, which is down where our larynx is, where you have the division of the esophagus and the trachea. So the pharynx is basically the back of the throat in a human, but it starts up in the sinuses and goes all the way down to the larynx. It's a very muscular tube lined with that mucous membrane with lots of cilia. It separates the respiratory and digestive systems, and it's subdivided into our three segments that I talked about: the nasal, oral, and laryngeal pharynx. Now, the wall of the digestive tract starts in the pharynx. And so this wall of the digestive tube has 4 layers in it, okay? This is not what we're talking about, the pharynx, right? We're moving on to the entire digestive tract. So the digestive tract, if you were to look at the wall of the tract, do I have a picture? Of course I don't. That would be helpful. So if you look at, let's say, here's the tube that is the digestive tract, okay? And here's the lumen. Just so you know, the lumen is always the hole that stuff passes through. So like in a blood vessel, the hole is the inside of the tube. The digestive tract, the lumen is the hole that the food travels through. The mucosa is the mucous epithelium closest to the lumen. So we'll underline that mucosa here in red. The mucosa is typically going to make lots of mucus so things slide down easily, which makes sense, right? We want stuff to smoothly slide down our digestive tract. The submucosa is usually adjacent to that mucosa. It's the tissue, a connective tissue, that is underlying the mucosa, giving it something to stick to. The muscularis, which I'm going to do in orange here, is the next region here. The muscularis is the smooth muscle that allows a process called peristalsis to take place. In other words, it allows contractions of the digestive tract so here's a cross view here. If you have the digestive tract that looks like this, you have contractions pushing food down through the tube, all right? And then the last membrane here, if I can get another color, let's pick green, is going to be the serosa. The serosa is the membrane that covers the abdominal organs. So I'm just going to make that right here on the outside here, okay? The serosa is going to be attaching the digestive tract to the abdominal wall, and actually kind of connects it to other abdominal organs, which we'll talk about later. With all the blood vessels, the lymphatic vessels, the lacteals in this region, that whole, the serosa, connects into folds called the mesenteries, which is a really interesting lacy tissue that holds the digestive tract to the abdominal pelvic wall. So starting from the top, we did the mouth. We're now going, and we talked about the pharynx, we're now going to go down to the esophagus. The esophagus is a really muscular mucous epithelium, ciliated mucous epithelium lined tube, which is about 10 inches long, depending on how tall you are. It connects the pharynx to the stomach, all right? So the muscular walls push food towards the stomach using peristalsis, okay? Peristalsis, I really want you to remember that word. Peristalsis is the smooth muscular contraction pushing food through the digestive system, usually in one way. If peristalsis goes out of control, then you feel nauseous and it pushes food back the other way. And we call that barfing or vomiting, right? So peristalsis is the normal way of food being pushed down through your digestive system. Inappropriate peristalsis is nausea and vomiting. It's not really inappropriate, but if you ate something that was bad, it's your body's way of getting rid of it. It feels bad though, right? I'm sure you could agree with that. So the muscular walls push food down towards the stomach, and the food only goes in one direction based on sphincters or muscular valves that keep food going in one direction. When we are undergoing peristalsis or nausea that pushes food back the other way, we have to overcome those sphincters, which is part of why we feel terrible. So the end of the esophagus is guarded itself by a sphincter called the esophageal sphincter, okay, the upper esophageal sphincter, UES. And there's a lower esophageal sphincter, the LES. So here's an example showing the esophagus, and you'll see the esophagus ending in the stomach where you'll have the lower esophageal sphincter, and the upper esophageal sphincter is going to be located right around here. Oops, upper UES is right here, and the lower UES is right here. All right, we'll talk about GERD in just a minute.